Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the hearing to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory, in the home and traditional lands of the Ojibwe, the Cree, Dakota people, and the national homelands of the River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nations in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Ron Merritt. I'll be your chairperson this afternoon, introducing the panel members via the Zoom. Kara Penner and Mr. Kevin Stephenson. Representing the city of Winnipeg is Matthew Barocas, and our recording secretary is Fran Picatu. We'll be hearing an application for revision of the Realty Business Tax Roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested has been described in each application, and we will limit discussions to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent, along with the City Administration. We make our decisions based on the evidence at the hearing, and we will issue a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision in respect to application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to application for an exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respect to the hearing this afternoon, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have. Then there will be the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each party will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all evidence about the application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. It will be then the process will repeat for each item on the docket this afternoon. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the record. This afternoon, we'll be hearing just one item, which was number 6 on our docket. So I ask Ms. Picado to swear in the assessor or affirm him, and also the applicant. Thank you.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Matthew Barocas.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
My name is Jared Story.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's begin. And we only have the one item, which is number 6. And the property address is 93 St. Anne's Road, and it's unit number 100. So, Mr. Barocas, I understand that you're filling in for Mr. Michaluk. So you may proceed and take us through this property for business tax appeal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. File number 24-4696. It's business tax appeal for unit 100 at the address of 93 St. Anne's Road. Premise area is 2,150 square feet. We've got a base ARV of 2287. That's the number that is in dispute. And then we have occupancy costs as well. Once you add the occupancy cost and the total annual rental value is $54,960. The building it's an apartment. It's got the commercial office space on the main floor of it. It's located about 5 streets south of the junction of St. Anne's and St. Mary's, on the corner of St. Anne's and Pilgrim Avenue. So it's kind of surrounded by a bunch of residential and Then there's some kind of there's smaller commercial units as well. Up and down St. Anne's, if you're at all familiar with the area, the property is owner occupied, so we don't have a subject lease to work off of. Looking at the comps here, we've got 1, 2, 3. We got 6 comps, and the range goes from $20 net all the way to 27. They're on Dakota. This building, the subject was built in 2020. And while I was reviewing this, because I just got this morning, looking at the ages of the comparables, the first 2 are from 1979, 53 Goulet and 57 Goulet. If you're familiar with where Marion runs into Main Street, there's like a commercial development that has I think it's a Shoppers Drug Mart in there, and McDonald's as well. So those 2 comparables are in that general parking lot commercial area. The building is 1979. Then there's another commercial space on Marion, 1968. 177 St. Mary's. It's built in 2013, actually. That's further down toward south towards the subject property. $22. And then we have another one on Goulet, which is up again in that general area where the McDonald's is, that commercial area where Marion meets Main. At $20, that's a 1965 building, and 620 Dakota, which is actually south of the subject property. It's 2013 built, and it's $27 per square foot. So the average of these rents is $23.56. We're at $22.87. On the second page of my brief here, there's a picture of the commercial rent roll indicating what rent they're reporting. There's a few other columns here that indicate that it is indeed owner occupied, which ought to have been included, but weren't. So we're not relying on this rent roll. And then there's just a picture of the subject property. This property was actually heard on the realty side of the coin, and there was no dispute on the rents at that hearing. So it seems the dispute is new for the rental rate. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rokas. Mr. Story, questions of the assessor?
Yes, indeed. I do have a few questions. Sorry, Mr. Brokus, you'd mentioned that the rent on the commercial space wasn't in dispute, but this is indeed a new hearing, and it does appear that these rent comps are new as well. This is not the comp set that was submitted in support of the model position for the realty. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't make this brief, so if that's the case, that's the case. Okay.
So, and I appreciate that these are somebody else's comps, I suppose, but did you have the chance to, like, I suppose you reviewed them now, did you notice that all of these have superior parking and signage opportunities?
Yeah, like I was trying to get forth in my presentation. They're the ones on Goulet, especially. They're in that big commercial.
Yeah, that's Dominion Center, right?
Yeah. I don't know the name of it, but I don't like driving in there because it's kind of traffic madness. But yeah, it's surrounded by more commercial, and there is a parking lot in general. Our subject property does have residential streets along the side of it where there would be parking.
Right.
Not on the property itself, though.
Right. Okay. So that's my next question. So my understanding, and tell me if this is your understanding as well. Only 2 of the stalls in that call it a ResAm development are available for the office, correct?
I'm not sure, but I would assume some of the parking there in the back would be taken up by the residential tenants.
Right. And again, would you agree with me that based on the fact that we don't have a unit in a large, high traffic, high visibility commercial center, that would require some adjustment? Would you agree with that?
Well, I mean, it is on St. Anne's, so it's not like it's tucked away off of a main thoroughfare. Now, it doesn't have parking immediately on site, but you could park on Pilgrim, you could park on Imperial, you could park on Humboldt. Like there's parking on those
Right.
streets. And there is, while
Right.
there's not signage up like on the building, like I mean, a lot of people like they just go on their phone. Hey, what am I looking for? Internet, boom, this is the address, and I go there. It's not as much as seeing the sign as I drive by anymore.
But
So I
people
wouldn't
do.
really, I don't think location is an issue here.
Okay. Sorry, but people do pay premium for signage and visibility, correct?
I guess it depends on what sort of business they're looking to occupy the premise with.
Okay. And just to be fair, a number of these properties or a number of these tenancies could not operate in our subject property, correct?
The businesses and the comparables.
Precisely. Yeah.
I'm not sure. I didn't look in depth into what those premises actually were, so I can't comment on that.
Okay. I do have some rebuttal, Mr. Chair. I'll be quick with it, but one last question, Mr. Brokus. Can we agree that that rent at 118 Marion, that is a very, very short lease, which would typically command a premium at only 1 year, and it is much smaller than our subject, only 750 feet. Is that a fair comment?
It's the smallest one.
Right, but it's also a lease of only 1 year, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I will leave my questions of the assessor there, Mr. Chair, but I do have some rebuttal based on the
All right.
comps.
So, Mr. Story, we will do your presentation afterwards and then deal with the rebuttal.
Sure, that sounds good.
Okay?
Yep.
All right. Ms. Penner, questions of the assessor?
No questions for me, thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Stephenson, any questions of the assessor?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. I just have a couple. I know you were just thrown into to act and to do this presentation, but this is a fairly new building. It was built in 2020.
That's correct, yeah.
There's 2150 square feet, eh?
For the commercial premise, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's all the questions that I have. So, Mr. Story, we're ready for your presentation, and you can do your presentation, and then we'll do the rebuttal after that.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. Okay, so as we've established, we are in a newer multiple use property. So this is it's unique, certainly from the comparables that I think have been submitted by both the assessor and myself, that it is primarily an apartment building. So there are apartment units in this building, and then the owner operates their sort of small French language media production house. So that is what goes on here. It is a small local business. They own the building, they rent the apartment units, and then they use that main floor commercial space as their office. So it is quite unique. And I do point out that there is no traditional parking in terms of what we would expect to see for a suburban office with only 2 stalls at the back. And then of course you're cohabiting a building with residential tenants, which is very unique. And of course there is no option for signage, and I would dispute that. Certainly you can look on your phone to find an address, but having a big sign on a busy street is a benefit, and we don't have that here. So we have, once again, we've established it with the corner of Pilgrim and St. Anne's. I've provided you, Mr. Chair, with a number of rental comps. I noticed I didn't see on Mr. Brocus's sheet, but some of those are older builds. I've used builds that are my oldest one is 1997, but I've tried to keep it to 2000 and newer. So I have two very good comps at 147 Provencher. Obviously, higher traffic. I would suggest to you a better location. And those are rents that are germane to our reference data at $19 and $20 per foot. And then I have a number of newer, smaller office builds, office and retail. And my average comes to $18.72 per foot with a median of $19 per foot. So we've applied $19 per foot in this instance. And that is actually supported by the assessor's comps as well when we consider that we should be factoring down for, again, that lack of parking, that unique situation without signage, and of course the fact that we are cohabiting this building with residential tenants. So I've provided those comparables for you, Mr. Chair. Ultimately, our position comes to 46,620. Now, this is important because we are, I mentioned that this is a small operator owning a small French language media production studio. So we believe that they should be under that SBTC, the small business tax credit threshold of 47,700. And so this figure actually works perfectly to get them right under that line. So we believe that $19 per foot is appropriate in this instance, giving us a base ARV of 40,850. And then when we add our occupancy costs, we come to 46,655, which we then of course round to 46,620. I have included a photo of the subject on my page 9. You can see there are only 2 stalls in the back for this property, no signage, and it is, you know, from the street level at least, it looks like an apartment building, not a typical office building. I've included some photos of my comps. They all have superior parking and superior signage. They're in slightly different areas in some cases, but I've tried to look to superior or properties with superior elements in order to support our position. So that's all for you as well. There's some details about Manitoba Media on page 14, as well as the discussion about the SBTC. So based on our submission and our review, I agree with Mr. Brocus, in the realty, the agent who was attending did not contest those rents. However, on further review, I believe that those rents are too high. And this is a similar situation with the previous cycle where the assessment of the realty was actually confirmed, but the board did order that the BA was too high. So there is some precedent for that in this case. So again, Mr. Chair, we respectfully submit that the value for this cycle not exceed 46,620. And I will leave my main presentation there, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Story. Mr. Barocas, questions of the applicant?
Yes. So just looking at your comparable list on page 5, these are the comparables that Altus presented at the realty hearing. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I picked these myself for the purpose of this specific exercise. Sorry, are we frozen here, folks?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Are we?
No, I think he's back.
Sorry, I missed the answer you cut out there.
Sorry. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, I said that you had asked if these were presented in support of the realty, and I said no, these were selected for the purpose of this specific exercise.
Starting to cut out again.
Okay. So no. So can you hear me now, Mr. Brocas?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. So no, what I said was that these were selected for this specific exercise. They were not submitted as part of the realty appeal.
Okay. And then there's a number of comps on your list, like Pembina Highway, in Fort Garry, Henderson Highway, Corden, Vermilion out by Lagimodier.
Yeah.
Would you agree that these aren't in the same general area as the subject?
Yeah, that's a great point. So the first, so 1, 2, and 6 are pretty close. Indices 1, 2, and 6. But what I tried to do, it was actually interesting. It was somewhat difficult to find premise areas that matched up with our subject that were also modern. So I suppose we took different tracks in terms of, you would use some, I think you said from the 70s or even the 60s, and I had tried to use properties that were closer to the actual age, but they were throughout the city. So yes, that is correct. They are in different locations. But as I mentioned, I did try to pick properties that would be deemed superior to further support our request today.
Okay. And would you consider an upward adjustment on your overall rent calculation based on the age of the premise?
Yeah, so no, because we're using properties that are newer. So I don't know how granular you want to get with the age adjustment, but if we're using something that's 2012 or 2008, I think that's reasonable when we're looking at a building that was built 12 years after that. So that would be in the same vintage in my mind. And I do think that if we take the actual rents that we have here on balance, when we consider the fact that our properties have huge parking lots, they've got great signage opportunities, and they're also agglomerative in that they're surrounded by other businesses. So that's typically why businesses prefer to cluster into strip malls and that sort of thing. So on balance, I think that the $19 that we're using is quite fair. I think that we would probably adjust down maybe to the lower end of that range. But no, I'm comfortable with $19 per foot, given the fact that we have these unique features of our property that are not typical of other rental comps, neither yours nor mine. So they would generally require a downward adjustment as opposed to an upward one.
Okay, those are my questions. Thanks.
I thank you. Ms. Penner, questions of Mr. Story?
Yes, please. I was just wondering if there's any distinction made between tenancies that are more retail in nature versus office in
Yeah.
nature in terms of your considerations for the value of signage and parking and
That's a great question. Yeah, absolutely. So we try to, or what I've tried to do is, while we're broadly looking for a premise that would be considered office or retail, we try to avoid certain types of premises that would typically command a premium. So hair salons, for example, medical clinics, restaurants, those would be on the much higher end of the scale. They would require a different level of fit up. So in this case, we know that it's an office area, right? So it's not quite the same as retail, but retail would be fine as long as we're not using a restaurant or some such thing. So I have tried to look for professional services broadly, as opposed to any of those outliers that would distort the rent upward. And I'm glad you asked that, because we'll get to a couple of these indicators in my rebuttal, and you'll see how that actually materializes in terms of the actual rents. So we've looked for professional services and tried to look into or ensuring that we're not applying anything that would be considered an outlier that would drive that average up.
Thank you very much. That was all for me.
I thank you. Mr. Stephenson?
My question was just asked. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Story, you had mentioned about the threshold. Can you repeat the number?
Yes, my understanding, sir, is that it's 47,700. And that's based on, I didn't see a new report for 2025, but I presume that the 2024 threshold will continue forward. So, and again, we do believe that these folks, if this is exactly the type of operation that should be benefiting from this type of incentive. So, yes, I believe it's 47,700, and our figure is certainly below that threshold.
Yeah. So my colleagues, because you were asking for 46,620, you were below the threshold, so it wouldn't be subject to business tax.
They would receive an offsetting credit as part of the city's program. That's correct.
All right. All right, we were going to deal with your rebuttal, so I'll ask our secretary to distribute it if she hasn't already.
Yeah, I've distributed the applicant's rebuttal.
All right. So if everybody's comfortable with their particular information, Mr. Story, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. And I will be very, very brief. But as we mentioned here, 53 and 57 Goulet, those would be considered more prime locations. That's the Dominion Shopping Center. We all know that very large Shoppers Drug Mart anchored grocery store or pharmacy that's very close to the St. Boniface Hospital. It has a huge amount of parking. That is certainly a more prime location than the unit inside of our apartment block. 118 Marion, once again, that's the office of Dougal Lamont, or at least it was. It's only 750 feet. The lease is only 1 year, and my understanding is that is actually a gross lease. I'd reviewed this property in the past, and my understanding was that was actually gross. So I appreciate that Mr. Barocas was not the one who selected these, but I wanted to ask Mr. Mikulek if he noticed that, but my understanding is indeed that is a gross lease, and that's at a very, very desirable intersection of Taché and Marion. 137 Goulet is not in Dominion Center, but rather that little strip that's anchored with the large Salvation Army thrift store. It's right next to Dominion Center. It's close to it's by the Giant Tiger, I guess. So it's in that main stretch. That's a high traffic strip mall. Again, signage and ample parking. I believe that indicator was the World of Water retail outlet. So, and then once again, and Ms. Penner, you'd asked about a question about the different types of tenancies. In this case, that very, very high rent on Dakota is a frozen yogurt place. It's a restaurant. So we certainly wouldn't use that frozen yogurt premise as a comparable for a small professional office space. And again, this is in a neighborhood strip. It's high traffic, signage, ample parking. So all of those rental indicators would require substantial adjustment to indeed be comparable. And even then, Mr. Chair, we're talking about again a fairly unique premise and subject where we are, of course, embedded into a multifamily property. So given these rental indicators, I believe that they support our request for $19 based on the adjustments that would be required. So that is my rebuttal, and I thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Barocas, questions of Mr. Story's rebuttal?
Yes. So the first property, the first two columns on Goulet,
Yep.
They would be 40 years older than the subject property, would they not?
The actual building, yes, but we don't know, or I don't know. You might have a better sense of whether or not that the interiors have been fitted up. I mean, this is a high quality investment property. I don't think that the interior would be true to its vintage. I think generally when you have a company like H&R Block renting that space, I mean, that's a very, very strong covenant. That's something else we didn't really talk about, but that's a very strong covenant. And I would presume that their space would be fit up to meet their current brand standards. So yeah, you've submitted a comp in an older building, but I still believe that it is a superior premise. Though I haven't been inside, I would suggest that it's likely fit up and quite modern. I've been in a number of these units very recently, and they're completely modernized, the ones that I've seen. So no issue there.
Okay, so then when I'm looking at Dakota, that's got a rent of $27, and you'd agree that it's I guess its situation with a parking lot and like a Dollar Tree, it would be comparable to the properties on Goulet, would you not? From a kind of like a locational overall perspective?
I think the property on Goulet is much more desirable personally, but I also would point out that the unit that you've supplied here is a restaurant. So we wouldn't typically use a restaurant. We'd use something more retail or office based. But I think that that high traffic location of Goulet would generally be considered superior to Dakota. That's my personal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it says you indicated as a high traffic strip mall with signage and ample parking, and that's a 2013, correct?
And it's a restaurant.
Okay. So, does it not seem that there is some value that would be attributed to the age of the building?
No, I think that that higher rental rate is based on the fact that it's a restaurant and it's the only restaurant that you've submitted here. Typically, restaurant rates are higher than office rates. All else considered equal, yeah.
Okay, so just to be clear, are you, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but you're not saying that the age of the building doesn't affect the rents, are you?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying though that if we're fixated on Dakota, that's a restaurant. So you didn't use restaurants in you didn't use the McDonald's or the Little Caesars or the Subway or any such thing in Goulet, right? And I think if you had, you'd find that those rents are higher still. So I don't think that the reason why the Dakota indices is higher than your other comps is based on age. I think it's based on use and it's based on degree of fit up. And that's because once again, it's a restaurant.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
I thank you, sir. Ms. Penner, questions of Mr. Story's rebuttal?
No questions for me, thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Stephenson?
No questions, thank you.
All right, either party wants summation?
I had submitted a rebuttal as well, just.
All right.
So I
We'll
just,
deal with your rebuttal then?
yeah, it's real quick.
Okay, Fran, let us know when you can distribute that.
Yeah, I
Okay.
just added it to the SharePoint and sent the email to Mr. Story.
All right.
You should get it shortly.
Mr. Story, let us know when you receive it.
Nothing yet, but I'll hit refresh. Okay, I have it, sir.
All right, let's proceed.
Okay, so
Mr.
basically, what I'm saying is what I touched on before, how during Realty, there was no dispute on the rents. They had completely different comps, and these comps supported the city valuation. But more importantly, that's already been touched on. If you go to my second page, I'm showing a map where the applicant comparables are from compared to the city of Winnipeg comparables. So the applicant in this new list of comparables for business assessment looks like they made the net much bigger in order to populate the table with rents supporting a reduction. Whereas the city of Winnipeg assessor, you can see, chose rents that were in the general area and didn't stray. And I think that if we are looking for comparables and we have addresses within the general area, we should stick in that general area because it makes a difference. So I'm asking that the business assessment be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Story, questions?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. So sorry, Mr. Brokus, you're suggesting that, okay, so you have an issue with the fact that we've used comparable rents from different areas of the city, but you've used tenancies that were not comparable, correct? So can we agree? I guess what I'll ask you is, can we agree that restaurant rents and medical rents and that type of thing typically command a higher rental rate based on degree of fit up? Would you agree with me on that? Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
I don't have any information in front of me today to support that claim, so I can't confirm that, no.
Oh, okay. I think I'll leave it there then. Thank you, Mr. Brokers. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
I thank you. Ms. Penner, questions?
Maybe this is just repeating the same question again, but in this list of comparables that were used previously, the first few are newer buildings and, you know, relatively similar size. Do we have any notion of what the tenancies were for those properties?
I'm not sure. I know in the like Sage Creek, just from my own knowledge, that's in those premises, I believe, would be in that general commercial area where they have like the McDonald's and they have like a Tim Hortons and kind of like bigger box places, bigger box tenants. And you can see how those rents are actually higher. No, these aren't those big box places. They're smaller units next to the big box places. So that's as far as I know in regards to the top of the list there.
That was all for me. Thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Stephenson?
No questions, thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Baracus, summation if you want.
I'm good, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Story, summation?
Yes, just very quickly, Mr. Chair. Once again, the rents that are being discussed here, we're talking about restaurants in some cases. In some cases, we're talking about smaller areas that are again agglomerative, where there are a cluster of businesses that are now shadowed by a large big box. Those would command a higher rent. So our very our perspective today, Mr. Chair, is that the $19 rent that we're discussing has to be taken in its proper context. We're talking about a unit that is, once again, within an apartment building. It has no parking and it has no signage. So broadly, we're talking about $2 per foot adjusted downward from some of these better comps. So I think that is well supported. And again, when we consider the fact that that these folks are a small business that should definitely fall under that SBTC threshold, I think our submission is well researched, and I think we've presented a compelling case that the assessment ought not to exceed $46,620, and would respectfully submit that our submission be given weighted consideration in that context. And I thank you.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for your presentations. Mr. Story, results very soon by mail. So thank you for your attendance, and thank you, Mr. Baracus. We have heard all the items scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned. So thank you, gentlemen.
Wonderful.
And have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks.